We are with Adrian Bridge, and today we're going to be talking about port. We have quite a lot of port in front of us, but let's just start with the basics. What is port?
Well, port is a fortified wine, so that basically means that it is a wine with a higher alcohol than a normal wine, and it's a little bit sweeter because we kind of stop the fermentation by adding this neutral grape spirit.
And where do we find port? Where is port from?
Well, the real place is from northern Portugal, where I live and work. So the Douro Valley.
Unlucky you.
Well, I have to say it is one of the most beautiful wine regions in the world.
Yeah.
And you know, it's this very remote valley that along this river Douro, which flows from Spain across Portugal, arrives at the Atlantic, and I live and work on the Atlantic in the city of Porto. So hence Porto wines, port wine. This is where the name comes from. But this valley is an extraordinary testament to man's ability to turn these rugged hillsides into a terrain that they can make wine from. Old terraced walls, extraordinary sort of, we have a hot climate, really hot summer, cold winter, low rainfall. But as a result, we get really concentrated grapes. And when you get really concentrated grapes, you can make good wine.
Right. And so why make port instead of wine? Is the history there, or is it just that type of wine has always done better with that type of grape?
I mean, we've been doing this for 322 years, so I guess there's a little bit of tradition, you'll have to say. But no, of course, you can make very good table wine in the Douro Valley. I think historically, the reason that people made port is that because of the heat, the idea that sometimes if you were making table wine, it could actually spoil because of that heat during the fermentation. And with us, we're stopping the fermentation when it's only halfway through. So it's only about 3.5 days from picking to when we stop it. So the heat doesn't really cause any problems at that stage.
Right.
And I think there's another point, and that is that when we got into business 322 years ago, sugar didn't really exist. It was difficult to find find things that were sweet, and that's why fortified wines became very popular. And in our particular case, by adding that spirit, stopping the fermentation, you leave a lot of the natural grape sugar, and that's what gives this lovely richness, this sweetness, this sort of texture and these flavors.
And so within the category of port, there's obviously a ton of variety. So can you break down for us, if you're standing looking at bottles of port, where do you even begin?
Well, I mean, the good news is that there's a port for everybody. Yes, from these grapes that we've got, we can actually make a number of different styles. But the styles really are fairly straightforward to understand, and that is that if we take something like a vintage port, this is a bottle matured port, going to last a long time in a bottle. You can have it young, you can have it old, depends what your personal choice is. But
your willpower for holding
well, your
on to
willpower and your storage facilities and all sorts of other things. But the point about it is it's a wine that has been aged in a bottle, so it's got this lovely layers and layers of flavors. It's the very best of what we do, if you like. It's about 1.5% of total port production, so it's a really peak end of it.
Highest end port.
Yeah, going to cost you a little bit more money, but it's going to deliver with lots of layers of flavor and lots of layers of structure. Now, if you want to, if you're looking to get into port, my personal suggestion is probably to get in with something like the Fonseca Bin 27. That's what we call a reserve port. So it's about 4 years old. Again, big, fresh berry fruit flavors. Like black currants, blackberries, some of those big fruit flavors. And that's going to go incredibly well with chocolate. You want to pair this up with a nice chocolate dessert. Perfect way to end the meal. Now, that's been aged in wood for those 4 years, and the wood being a big vat. Big being, say, 30, 40,000 litres. I'm not quite sure what that is in gallons, but a good size.
But large.
But it's large. So you've got this large volume of liquid, very little surface area of wood, so you retain all this lovely colour and all this incredible freshness of fruit. But if you put it into a small barrel, which we do with our aged tawnies, and we've got the 10-year-old here, then what you see is 600 litres. So it's something, we've probably fit it under this table here. Small barrel, lots of surface area of wood. As a result, what happens is we get a lot of evaporation, the wine sort of concentrates down. What you do is you lose a bit of wood colour into the wood, and the flavours go from these black currant, cassis sort of flavours down to these dried fruits. So here we've got honey, dried apricots, all that sort of richness. And this is what we're going to have with an apple pie, or coming up to Thanksgiving or whatever. It's a perfect thing to have. But creme brulee, it goes very well with creme brulee, or foie gras is a great combination.
So you start with the reserve, move yourself up to tawny, and then when you have a really special occasion, say, all right, it's time to go for a vintage.
I think that's a good way. I think also you want to always with wines, you're always thinking about the food you're going to have as well. So again, if you're going to be chocolate, then I'd go with these stronger, whether it be a vintage porter or the Min 27, or I'd go with those. If I'm going to be having a different dessert, I'd probably go with the aged tawny. So there is a port for different occasions, for different mixes. And we've got a white port here as well. We didn't mention this, but this is really an aperitif cocktail. This is with a tonic water. A great way to sort of start a meal.
Well, thank you so much for giving us this introduction to port. Obviously, there's so much more to learn, but we really appreciate you giving us the basics. So cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.